from a scientific standpoint, in some sense, the explanation of how we came to be is really the fundamental question. That's what you really want to figure out, is why are we the way we are? And Darwin seemed to account for that pretty well, so I didn't put too much thought in it. Went to college, and I was a biochemistry major, and I was thrilled to be in college, thrilled to be at kind of like a higher level of science. And I recall in my biology classes and my biochemistry classes, thinking that there was something missing in my understanding of the world. For example, in biochemistry, we would learn about all these intricate molecular pathways, the Krebs cycle and DNA and DNA replication and so on. And it struck me as being the kind of thing that, number one, wouldn't come about without some kind of intelligent agency. And I mean, how does something like this arise just from randomness? And even the Darwinian explanation that there's natural selection, the survivors survive, that didn't strike me like it was enough of an argument to actually explain how things happen. So I had my doubts. But I was very interested in the brain and the way the brain worked and its relation to the mind. And I decided to become a doctor, and I went to medical school. And in medical school, I fell in love with neuroanatomy and neurophysiology, and decided I wanted to be a neurosurgeon because that was the most intimate way I could understand the mind and the brain. And it was good, challenging work. And as it turned out, my mother had a brain aneurysm hemorrhage when I was a kid. So we had all, and she survived, and we all had a very high view of neurosurgeons in our family. So it seemed like the right thing to do. So I went into neurosurgery. You had mentioned my religious conversion. At this point, I was agnostic, as I said. I actually liked Christians. I thought Christians were actually really nice people, and I kind of wished I were a Christian, except I thought it was a myth, and I wasn't going to embrace a myth. And I began to have these moments as I got married, I had kids, that I kind of call my mansion experiences. And what I mean by that is it was an analogy would be if you woke up one morning in this incredibly beautiful mansion and you're amnestic for how you got there. You have no idea where you came from, no idea why you're there. But you really are in a lovely place, and there are other people living there, and you meet them, and you people make dinner for you, and you get all this wonderful stuff. And I thought it was odd that I wasn't asking the deeper questions, like, so how did I get here? Like, where do I come from? And I would mention it to my wife, who was not religious either, and she would just say that that's kind of a creepy thought, and we should think about other things. Because you got so much. you got your job, you got your family, you got your friends, you got all the kinds of things in the world where we have this enormous sensory input. So why waste your time thinking about creepy stuff like that? But I couldn't stop thinking about it. So I got involved a little bit with the intelligent design Darwinism question, because I noticed in just my reading that there were people who were questioning the Darwinian theory, just like I had questioned ever since I was a kid. It seemed an awfully weak theory, practically a tautology. Survivors survive. And I thought it was interesting that there were scientists who were actually challenging that, and I thought that was kind of a good thing. But I still didn't. I was still an atheist, or at least an agnostic. And when my youngest son was born, I have 4 kids, and when my youngest son was born, we noticed when he was a few months old that he wasn't really making eye contact and he wasn't smiling, and I was very concerned that he might be autistic, and by autistic, I don't mean sort of just a little bit on the spectrum, but profoundly disabled, as a certain percentage of people on the autism spectrum are. And what I really feared was that he wouldn't know me. He would just live in his own little world. And I had these nightmares that, when he was an older child, that the other kids would be out playing baseball and he'd just be sitting in his room rocking back and forth and completely detached from me and from his family and from the world. So this really frightened me, and my wife was also frightened by it. And we took him to a pediatric neurologist who said that he's too young to know. He was a few months old. So when he was almost 6 months old, it was kind of coming to a head. I mean, I was really I was really upset. And one night I was seeing a patient in consultation at an outside hospital. It was a Catholic hospital. And after I had seen the patient, I was leaving the hospital. It was a little before midnight, and the chapel in the hospital was still open. It was open 24/7. So I went into the chapel, and I was alone there. And I just knelt down in front of the altar, and I said, God, I don't know if you exist. I suspect you don't. I think Christianity is a myth. But if you do exist, I need some help here. This is something I can't deal with. I can't deal with having a child who doesn't know me and doesn't love me. And I heard a voice, only time in my life I've ever heard a voice. And the voice said, but that's what you're doing to me. So I, kind of collapsed in front of the altar. And when I got my thoughts together, I said, well, all right, I won't do it to you anymore. But please heal my son. So the next morning I called up the Catholic Church, because it was in a Catholic chapel that I had had this experience, and I said, I need to get baptized now. let's do it today if we can. And they said, no, you got to go through RCIA. It's this whole process. I was okay. So I entered into that, and some of my kids came with me. And I got a completely different perspective on God, and a different perspective on life, and a different perspective on science. And I came to realize that for science, you can't leave God out of it. I mean, God is the creator of the universe. He's the creator of the laws of nature. And in a very real sense, the laws of nature, and even we ourselves, are thoughts in God's mind, which was Saint Augustine's insight. And so we can't leave God out. We can't leave intelligent design and the inference that there is intelligent agency behind nature and intelligent agency as the foundation of science. We can't just ignore that. And also, I began to look a little more critically at materialism in neuroscience, the materialist understanding of the mind. The understanding that I had was that the brain explains the mind completely. And there's a neurosurgeon and a neuroscientist named Wilder Penfield who worked back in the middle of the 20th century. And Penfield had actually said that was the fundamental question that he asked in his career, was, does the brain explain the mind completely? And he started out like I did, as a materialist, believing that it did. And over his career, he came to see very clear evidence that the brain does not explain the mind completely. The brain plays an important role in the mind, but there's aspects of the mind that are not in the brain. And I found that the way of understanding the human soul that began with Aristotle and St. Augustine, and I think culminated in St. Thomas Aquinas, really was the best way to understand the mind and the brain, that we do have souls. And it actually fits the neuroscience very well.
What would be certain things that you've come across during your career and during your research that you see as pointing away from that total materialistic explanation of what a human being is? Like, what are some of these kind of major theses that you're putting forward in the book?
Sure. Well, there are several lines of evidence, I think. In fact, you might say there are three. One is just logic, and there are all sorts of logical reasons that classical philosophers, who I think were quite right, have put forth as reasons why the soul cannot strictly be a physical thing, like from the body. There are also just my anecdotal experience. As a neurosurgeon, I've done 7,000 brain operations. I've seen a lot. And I've seen things that clearly, I think, call into question the materialistic way of understanding the mind. And there's hard neuroscience. There's a ton of neuroscience evidence that supports the view that the soul is real, and that mind is not explained entirely by the brain.
We just started reading Dr. Egnor's book, The Immortal Mind, a Neurosurgeon's Case for the Existence of the Soul in the Wisdom Society. It is not too late to join the conversation. If you click the link below, you can do so. We're going to read this book over the next 4 weeks, and then we are going to be joined by Dr. Egnor for a Q&A, a live Q&A in the Wisdom Society. So please join the conversation. Also, you'll get to meet some really cool people that I have really been blessed by over the last coming up on a year within the Wisdom Society. So maybe this is your chance to join the conversation, to read with us The Immortal Mind. Hope to see you there.